13. I'm joined by News 13's chief meteorologist, Ross Whitley. Hurricane season is almost upon us, and so Ross and I are going to talk about, what we expect for hurricane season, how you can prepare, how you can keep your family safe, some of the things that you need to be doing right now as we get into it. I think the first thing, though, is that Ross, we've already had 2 named storms.
Yeah.
And, the season hasn't begun yet. The season begins June 1st, right?
Yeah, historically, you see the first named storm after June 1st, which is why they named the Atlantic hurricane season June 1st to November 30th. But the last 6 years, in fact, we've had a tropical system develop before June 1st. So there are at least some rumblings out there like that we should start the Atlantic hurricane season the same time, say, the Eastern Pacific does, which is May 15th. That would seem to make a little more sense considering we've had that activity the last 6 years. But even still, if you go back to when we first started recording all tropical activity, it's still relatively rare to have a May tropical system. But here we sit with 2 names down on the list, and
Sure.
If the National Hurricane Center is correct, we've got 14 to 15 more names to chalk off the list before the season is done. Let's hope.
If only it worked that way, right? If only we hit 15, and then we could say, well, the rest of the year is fine.
As long as they're out in the middle of the Atlantic, or they spin around in the Gulf and sit there until they fizzle themselves out, I have no problem with there being 15 storms. It's the storm that comes ashore somewhere that's where I'm going to have an issue. So. We can hope. We know what the projections are, and now we're just going to be optimistic all season long.
Does having a storm before June 1st, or 2 storms in this case before June 1st, does that scientifically mean anything? We're going to have a worse season because we had 2 before June 1st?
That's a good question, but no. Statistically speaking, there's 0 correlation between early season activity and the rest of the season. Some seasons that have early season activity end up only having 5-6 storms total. Some seasons that have early season activity have 20 storms. So there's been 0 correlation between an early season storm and the rest of the season. So basically, it's just, we've had a couple of storms now, and we wait and see how the rest of the season goes. There's signs that it's going to be an active season just based off of the pattern that should set up overall, but hurricane season is just one of those enigmas. You just wait, and when storms happen, you forecast those storms and you roll with the punches.
Does the second one, Bertha, that kind of was Bertha the right name?
Yeah, no, you got it. Yeah,
good.
That's
I didn't mess it up. I don't pay attention to storms that don't hit us.
That's right.
That's my rule. It's like I can't get worked up about stuff that isn't going to hit us. But what was going on there? Because it felt like I woke up one morning and somebody said there was a storm, and it was like that day it was going to hit South Carolina.
Yeah,
right?
you're not wrong. You're not alone either. National Hurricane Center had a 20% chance of probability of this vortex that developed basically over the peninsula of Florida. Actually, sat there for a couple of days over Orlando, and then eventually moved up toward Jacksonville. And made it out into the Atlantic, but the original vorticity max, and I'm speaking a little too scientifically here, so basically saying the original area of spin is not what ended up developing into the tropical cyclone. It was actually deeper convection away from the original area of spin that formed a closed low, because you formed a closed low, and then it went right over the top of a buoy, giving good surface data. So we knew we had a warm core closed low system, and boom, that gives it a name. When you have a warm core closed low system over the Atlantic or Gulf of Mexico or Caribbean, then and it reaches that 40-mile-per-hour threshold, that magical number, it's a tropical storm. So because it ran right over the top of a buoy, we instantly knew, hey, this is a tropical storm. So it actually went from a 30% chance of probability of developing that morning to 4 hours before landfall. Here's a tropical storm. So you're not alone. I think plenty of meteorologists in the background knew that there was that potential there. I weren't really talking about it because it was a low potential, but to most people in the viewing public as yourself, You're probably like, what the heck? There's a
Right.
tropical system out there. And, overall, it really didn't change the forecast for the Carolinas whatsoever. They were expecting an all day rain there. They were expecting some breezy conditions. And, that's exactly what they got. Breezy conditions with 1 to 3 inches of rain, thankfully, from a quick moving closed low system. So giving it a name changed absolutely nothing when it came to the Carolinas. But it did chalk again a name off of the list, so hopefully we're just
when
gonna
we get to 15,
we're just gonna get
those
to
are our
that's
rules.
right, that's right.
Get
There
to
will be
15,
no
we're
more.
done.
That's
there
it.
will be a 16. And I mean, it can be uh, when we name these things, it takes it up a notch for people.
Right.
And I know that the meteorologists, the scientists are following the guidelines, but a lot of times, especially when you talk about tropical storms, they're not going to be massive events for people. Most people are going to see in a tropical storm a little bit of wind and a little bit of rain.
Yeah.
That's not different than a really strong thunderstorm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the case. That's why we try to preach impacts, not names and categories, because every person, even in a Category 5 storm, is going to experience something different, from the location of the eye wall versus the outer core density versus just some outer rain bands. So even in a Category 5 storm, you might only experience tropical storm type conditions. So you really need to focus on the impacts that you're going to receive out of a system, not what the system's name is or what category it is. Because, I mean, some of our historical storms in the past have even been non-named systems. I mean, we had 20 plus inches of rain fall in New Orleans from a system that sat there for 3 days. Should it have been classified as a tropical system? Probably, but it didn't meet that criteria. It never got to a closed low type of system, and it wasn't fully warm core, so can't really give it a name. So that's kind of the loss between science and then perception of what's going on, because you're absolutely correct. People hear a name and they're like, oh my gosh, like it's got a name now. But like I said before with Bertha, it didn't change the forecast one iota versus it having a name and not having a name. The impact to the Carolinas was exactly the same. So that is definitely something that we want to focus on here and throughout the future, is that don't really pay attention to name and category. Pay attention to impacts, specifically to your location, because that's what's most important. If you're going to see storm surge, that's important. If you're going to see wind gust, that's important. If you're going to see 5 to 12 inches of rain, that's important. If you see one of those things and not the other, then obviously your impact at your location is going to be completely different from somebody else's. So that's really what you should focus on when it comes to our tropical weather season. Because, like you said, sometimes tropical systems, tropical storms especially, your daily summertime thunderstorm is much worse than that tropical system. I mean, Alberto comes to mind. I mean, we've had severe thunderstorms that do way more damage and cause way more of a headache than Alberto did when it came through here. I mean, it was 30, 40 mile per hour wind gust, and it rained for a day. Big whoop. Like that.
Exactly.
We call that Florida weather.
Yeah. Well, and the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm a lifetime local, right? I feel like I've been through all of these hurricanes and all of these storms. I grew up here. Hurricane Michael comes along,
Right.
and I think, I'm sitting in the control room watching you one day as the storm's moving in, and you're saying, folks, this is going to knock down every tree. This is going to do serious damage. And I think to myself, is he overreacting? I mean, honestly, before Hurricane Michael hit, I think maybe he's, what's going on here? Because I feel like I know in my mind what at the time when it was happening was a Category 3 storm.
Right.
I feel like I've lived through a Category 3 storm, and, there were some damages, but it didn't knock down every tree. And, and then of course I think a lot of us longtime locals found out that no, we didn't know.
Yeah.
What was coming towards us, and we should have. I can't tell. I know you heard this too. If I heard it from one person, I heard it from 100. I wish I had left. I wish I had evacuated. I wish I had listened to the smart folks the meteorologists and the folks at the National Hurricane Center, and I mean to be fair to a lot of our government folks who were saying, "Get out,"
Right.
So, as we go through this season, you know, tell us, tell us how you're going to prepare us, when the time comes,
Yeah.
and what you're going to say to folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every storm is different. No storm will ever be Hurricane Michael. No storm will ever be Hurricane Andrew. We'll never have another Katrina. We'll never have another Hurricane Harvey. We'll never have another Hurricane Florence or Irma or Dorian. Like, those storms are unique to that storm because of the angle it came in, the strength of the storm, the location in which it started, the size of the storm. All of those things change the impacts to your coastal areas. I mean, if you take Hurricane Michael and you move it 100 miles to the west, but have it make landfall at the same exact location that it made at the exact same strength, you're talking about completely different impacts for different people. Just because of the direction that it comes from. You're going to be talking about storm surge that's different. You're going to be talking about different people seeing wind that didn't see wind. Even if you put it at the exact same location at the exact same time, just because it came from a different direction. So that's just one variable. Not to mention if you change the size of the storm, or if you make it a smaller storm, you make it a larger storm, you give it more rain, you give it less rain, you slow it down. All of those things are going to make every individual storm unique. And that goes back to what I was just saying. It's impacts versus name and category. And like I said, there will never be another Hurricane Michael. It will never, ever will we see the exact same storm. Will we see a storm that has that kind of catastrophic damage across the U.S. somewhere in the future? Yeah, absolutely. It will happen again somewhere in the future. And it could quite well even be here. It's very possible that we see that storm again, sure. But the chances of that happening, pretty low. And even if it does happen, it still won't be Hurricane Michael. Right. It will still be a different storm, and it will still have different types of impacts to all different types of people from all across the area. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's first and foremost is pay attention to the impacts. Pay attention to, what we're talking about, what the potential of the storm is going to be. And I don't think that, I'm preaching to deaf ears here. I think everybody is quite aware of tropical season now and weather in general just because of Hurricane Michael. So it's going to be a long time before anyone here has to say leave and people go, nah, I'm going to stay. I think for quite a while, people are going to go, okay, bye. Yeah. There may be a select few that went through Hurricane Michael that stayed and were fine, and they'll stay again. And you know what? That's up to them. You can't make everyone leave. And I would say do what you think is going to make you feel the most safe, the most comfortable, because nobody is comfortable, myself included, going through the aftermath of what we went through, like a week or 2 weeks without power and no toilet and no sanitation and no hot food. Like, that's not fun regardless of where you are. So if you can leave and stay in a hotel for a week, that sounds better than doing what we did.
Yeah, I always tell my family that we ought to have a vacation fund, and of course you and I are not going to leave. We're going to be here.
We're here regardless.
But if I was in a different career field, the answer would be sure would be nice to have a vacation fund, and we'll just take a vacation
when
for
that
a
happens,
week,
right?
If it looks bad and we feel like we need to go.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is I don't think a lot of people don't understand, and I don't want to disparage anybody who lived through Hurricane Michael, but some folks, if you were on, the west end of Panama City Beach over in Destin, you did not have the same impact that the people in Panama City and Mexico Beach went through. And so people need to understand that they, I wouldn't want anybody to say to themselves, if you got power back in 2 days and you got water back in 2 days, to say to themselves, I went through Hurricane Michael and I went through a Category 5 storm.
Right.
Because the next time, if it hits you, if it hits Panama City Beach, God forbid, or any place like that, the way it hit Mexico Beach, That's not the same thing.
Right. No,
You know,
and
even though they're really close together.
no, you're absolutely correct, and again, that does go back to knowing what the impacts are and knowing where it is your location, because obviously Destin didn't experience the same storm that Panama City did with Hurricane Michael, and and just as Opal hit Navarre Beach, so those that remember Opal, and I tried to explain that before Hurricane Michael was coming, that Michael wasn't going to be Opal because Opal made landfall in Navarre, not in Panama City. So obviously our impacts were completely different. We had a lot of storm surge with Opal, and we had some wind and we had rain. But because it was so much further off to the west, we didn't see the core of the storm. We didn't see the eye wall. We didn't have the most intense winds come across our area. We had storm surge because it was a large storm, and it was a strong storm offshore. So that built up that storm surge, and that's why the beach especially had so much storm surge damage, is because it was a very large storm, the direction that it came from, and then where it made landfall. So that's why that changed that impact. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. Knowing what you went through and that kind of perception, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion to everyone that's paying attention, but Panama City, for the majority, even back up to Lynn Haven, up through 231, did not go through a Category 5 hurricane. Tyndall Air Force Base went through a Category 5 hurricane. By the time it got to Panama City, your majority of your damage is Category 4. So keep that in mind when you're talking about perception, is that, we believe, and, I myself included carry that pride badge, I lived through a Category 5, but in reality, we didn't. We didn't see what Tyndall saw. We saw a slightly weaker storm that unfortunately sat on top of Panama City for an hour and 40 minutes. The same thing with Lynn Haven, same thing up 231. Just as, Mariana didn't see the same type of damage that Panama City saw, because the storm had weakened by the time it was going in. Was it still a Category 4? Absolutely.
Sure.
Did it do a lot of damage up there? Absolutely. But it is a perception of what the actual storm can do. So, you have to know that, and you have to realize what you went through and what kind of impacts are going to be, and that's what we're going to be communicating. I mean, that's my job. My job is to say, this is where the storm is most likely going to make landfall. This is exactly what you're going to see. This is what you need to be prepared for, whether it's 12 to 14 feet of storm surge, which, by the way, that's what we forecasted for Mexico Beach. It ended up at 15.5. So we were off by 1.5 feet. I mean, that's pretty dang close if you ask me.
Sure.
And that's the peak. The majority of the coastline for Mexico Beach back down to Port St. Joe, 12 to 14 feet is storm surge. 6 to 9 feet from East Point up to St. Mark's. That's what they saw. I mean, so that's our job, is to talk impacts and what people should expect out of the storm. The other side of things is taking those impacts, knowing how to humanize them to yourself, and think, okay, what is 6 to 9 foot of storm surge going to look like at my location? What is 50 to 70 mile per hour winds going to do to my home? And if it is unlivable with that kind of type, leave. That's just a simple answer. So our job is to give out impacts and what potentially we could see. And then the other side, the job of everyone paying attention, is to know how those impacts are going to directly impact them, because I don't have the time to specifically say, well, you live here and you live in this home and your home was built in this time and this is how high above sea level you are. I mean, that would just be ridiculous for me to be able to develop an emergency plan for every individual. I just can't do that. Right. But I can tell you, what the storm is, what the storm could be, and where the storm is likely going to go.
All right. We want to do two things going forward with the rest of this. The first is that one of the reasons why we're doing this today is tomorrow is the start of the sales tax holiday for hurricane supplies. The second thing is that on our Facebook page, if you have any questions, Chief Ross is going to try and answer those for you. And so we're looking for those. Just feel free to ask us a question, and over the next few minutes we'll do that. So tax-free holiday starts tomorrow. It's through June 4th. So starts Friday, ends Thursday. So self-powered light sources, which are light
flashlights or lanterns or candles that are powered by battery, solar, hand crank. Those are all tax-free. Gas, diesel fuel containers. Again, a bunch of batteries. Bungee cords, ground anchor systems, radios. Um, you know, basically, what do you think you need?
Anything you would need before and after a storm.
I want to say that I saw freezers on here, which a lot of us may have gone out and bought.
Yeah, coolers and ice chests.
Coolers and ice chests.
Food storage, non-electrical, so freezers probably are not included in that.
And then portable generators that are less than $750 are on the list. The whole list is on our website right now on mypanhandle.com and on our MyPanhandle mobile app. So you can check it out there. And again, this week is really the time to make sure that you're prepared, that your house is prepared. If you're going to stay. And many of us, for work reasons or whatever, do stay. You need. I think Ross will back me up here. You need stuff in your house that you can be without power for days. Hopefully, not longer than that, but days. And what we saw was 2 or 3 weeks. Right.
The recommendation now, actually, because of Hurricane Michael, is a week. So it used to be the 72. That was something that you would hear, the 72. Right. Be able to survive on your own for 72 hours without power and water. Well, now the recommendation is be able to survive on your own without power, water, and even being able to go anywhere for a week. So that was an end result of Hurricane Michael, because we did end up leaving communities isolated for, unfortunately, a week. That was just the kind of devastation that we had. So the idea here is a gallon of water a day per person that you have in your home per shelter. So a week's worth, a gallon of water a day. So that should be 7 gallons per person for 7 days. So if you've got 2 people, you need 14 gallons of water just for drinking. Then you have to keep in mind, if you want to use any of your appliances without water, say go to the bathroom, you're going to have flushable water as well. So that adds to that total of water that you need to have on hand. If you're deciding to stay. Now, I'm not going to discourage anyone that wants to stay, especially in a Category 1 or 2 type of storm. You're probably going to be okay riding out of Category 1 or 2. There's a reason they call major hurricanes major, because 3, 4, and 5 are going to cause major damage, especially when you have to deal with the eye wall. So, Category 1 and 2, is there going to be damage? Are some people going to be significantly impacted? Yes. Can you ride it out safely at your home? Most likely, that's fine. Even maybe a Category 3, but in my household, everyone has to make their own opinion. But my household, Category 3 is see ya.
That's the level. Right?
That's the level. Category 3 is bye. I'll see you. I'll see you when it's over. Unfortunately, we're here, so we're not leaving. But my wife, my dog, they're gone. They're not staying through a Category 3. They're gonna be going somewhere else.
The way we always prepared in my house growing up was the Walmart's going to be open in 2 days.
Right.
The Walmart's going to be back open in 3 days. Right. Or
the Waffle House index. Right.
Yeah, the Waffle House index.
When is Waffle House opening back up?
When are they closing them all down? And how soon do you think they'll open them back up? Well, a Category 1, a Category 2, and even a Category 3, you're talking a couple of days. I'll be able to drive if I have cash or whatever.
Right.
I'll be able to go to the Walmart and get what I need and eat good that night. All right.
Yeah, that's the other thing to keep in mind. I think all of these things on the list are.
That wasn't the case after Hurricane.
Right. All of these things are kind of duhas. Gas, flashlight lanterns, ice, reusable ice packs. Which without power, good luck refreezing. I don't. If somebody has an idea of how to do that, I would love to hear it. Bungee cords, ground anchors, radios, that kind of thing, batteries, the weather radio, all of those are kind of duhas. But something that we didn't think about, or probably didn't think about, is your hygiene products, something that's going to make you feel nice. When you haven't showered, your dry shampoo.
So great. Yeah.
Right. Your dry shampoo, your flushable wipes, those kind of things that, making going to the bathroom a little more pleasant. or giving yourself, what I would refer to as like a bird bath, a little wipe down with some flushable wipes, just to make you feel a little bit better while you're riding things out. I mean, those are things that are that you really need to keep in mind too, along with this list, is that those are stuff that you want to have in your prep kit. They're also suggesting, just because this year, obviously, the main story for the last couple of months has been COVID-19, that face mask be included in your kit, as well as gloves, hand sanitizer, and Lysol wipes, or some type of sanitizing wipe included in your kit, just in case, so whatever happens. Maybe you have a tree fall in your home, or a tornado goes through and you have something, and you end up having to go to a shelter. Those are things that you're going to want to have on hand when you do go to that shelter, is that you're going to want to protect yourself from potential exposure to the virus as well. So just as I said before, leading up through or after our tornado event, save your life first and then worry about your life later. So when it comes to hurricane, prepping for this, prep for the hurricane, save your life first, and then worry about the pandemic second, because if you don't live through the hurricane, you're not living through COVID-19. So those are steps 1 and 2.
All right, so we're going to do a little lightning round here with the Facebook question.
All right.
Deborah Mayo Ivy, how many times, when is the last time we had 2 named storms before hurricane season?
There's only been 4 years, so it's rare air that has happened. If I remember correctly, I'm going off of a tweet I read actually a couple days ago. So I'm thinking
we maybe have to follow up with the veracity.
Yeah, I don't know.
This.
I don't know the actual years, but I know specifically there's only been 4 years that has happened where we've had 2 named storms before. So forgive me for not knowing the specific years, but
that's all right.
But that's the best I'm going to be able to do. So it doesn't happen often.
It's a surprise question.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank everybody for watching. We just hope everybody stays safe and prepared this hurricane season. I just want to ask Ross one more time. Ross, what's sort of the big thing you want people to do, and what do you want people to know as we enter hurricane season?
Yeah, I think just pay attention, have a reasonable, calm approach. We always say that preparedness will keep you from freaking out. So the more prepared you are, that's going to take away some of that storm anxiety. We're not alone. You're not alone in storm anxiety. Everyone here that went through Hurricane Michael, or any significant weather event, tornado, major ice storm, whatever, everyone has some kind of storm anxiety. So prepping is going to take away from that, because you're going to know, oh, well, I have these supplies on hand. I have this, emergency route planned out. I have this as my backup plan. I have these kind of things. Those are all going to be things that kind of just ease the burden of a storm is approaching. I need to prepare. If you've already got the preparation out of the way, then you're not going to have that flare up inside of you. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, realizing, again, we're never going to have another Hurricane Michael. Every storm's going to be different. I mean, statistically speaking, there's only been 4 Category 5 hurricanes to hit the U.S. Last year, we didn't have a major hurricane hit the U.S. I mean, we had Dorian get really, really close, and unfortunately for the Bahamas, they had an impact. But there were no major hurricanes to hit the U.S. last year, and we had 18 named storms. So it was a relatively active season, and we didn't have any major hurricanes. Sure. So chances are that we may have a major hurricane hit somewhere in the U.S. this year, but chances are that we're going to go a period before we see another major hurricane here in our area. Our return period is about once in every 20 years that we see a major hurricane, and return period for tropical weather is about once every 3 years. So once every 3 years, we see some kind of tropical event, tropical storm, hurricane, subtropical system, whatever. And we did have, a tropical system last year. We had Nestor. It was basically a nothing storm.
Right.
St. George Island, St. George Bridge basically took the brunt of that. Part of Franklin County had a little bit of, washout on some roads and things like that, but really wasn't that big of a deal. So keep that in mind. We did have a tropical system last year, and before Hurricane Michael, we had a tropical system that year too. We had Tropical Storm Gordon impact the area before Hurricane Michael, and the year before that, we had Alberto. So tropical systems are going to come and go, but the chances that we see another Michael anytime soon are very, very low. So, keep that in mind when you're seeing a storm approaching the area. It's probably not going to turn into Michael, because I know the first question is going to be, how is this different from Michael, or is this going to be Michael?
Yeah.
Are we gonna? That's going to be the first question when we have a storm coming our way. Chances are, it's probably not going to be anywhere near the impacts that that Michael caused, or that Opal caused, or that any of our previous storms caused. I mean, that's just the statistics. So that's number 2, and then number 3 we've already hit. Know your impacts, know your zone, know what things are going to do at your home. Know if you're susceptible to storm surge, know if you're susceptible to flooding. Have all of those ideas in place. Again, that goes along with, if you're prepared, you won't be scared. So prepping and knowing those things are going to take away some of that anxiety too. So just want to reassure everyone that we're here. We're going to be talking you through it. We're going to give you a calm mind. And unfortunately, if I have to play bad guy and say, stop listening to dummies posting 360-hour GFS runs, then I'm going to do that. And eventually, I can promise you, at some point in time this year, we're going to be talking about a tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to happen before, sooner before later. It could happen as early as the end of next week. I mean, there's potential that we're talking about something that soon. But again, be reasonable, be rational, be calm, be prepared.
All right. Thanks, Ross. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll catch you guys next time.
We are the believers. We are the